I'm an autism awareness angel, making sure my wings protected different, the stranger than. I'm an autism awareness angel. It's good, cause I'm cool with the unique behavior. I'm an autism awareness angel. Will you accept me? Cause I accept you. I'm an autism awareness angel, cause a view from the spectrum is a better point of view. The question at hand, are you...
Hello, I'm Tally and welcome back to Autism 30. Today we are speaking with Dr. Wenn Lawson and recording from the beautiful PAFN's Good Life Fitness Hub located in Richmond, British Columbia, Canada. Dr. Wenn Lawson is a well-respected and highly knowledgeable expert on autism. He combines his lived experience insight with professional knowledge from his first-class honors in social work to a doctorate in psychology. He has been public speaking in many countries around the world for more than 20 years and published more than 15 books on autism, his first being Life Behind the Glass, published in 1998. He is currently a teaching fellow with Birmingham's University Online Masters of Autism course and resides on the Autism Open Access Board and the I CAN Board, Southwest Australia. He also joined the Autism Cooperative Research Centre in his home country of Australia, which was a highlight of his. And he is married to his lovely wife, Beatrice. It's a true pleasure that he has taken the time out of his very busy schedule to join us here today, and we feel so honoured to speak with him. Welcome, Dr. Wenn.
G'day.
Now, why did you choose to work in the field of autism?
I chose to work in the field of autism, as you put it, which has nothing to do with grassy paddocks.
No, you're absolutely right.
The area of autism, because I am autistic, and I really wanted other people to understand what autism is. And I tried, as a parent of autistic kids, to share my knowledge, I guess, my experience, really.
Yes.
But other professionals... I didn't feel respected as much. People kind of dismiss you when you're a parent, which is awful.
Yes, that's true.
Yeah. So I decided, well, to get them to listen, I need to become one of them. I have to study. So I went to school, back to school at the age of 38, because I didn't finish school really in the way that typical people might.
Yes.
Did the last 2 years at high school. Got good enough marks to go to university. And I did courses, a degree, first degree was in psychology and then social work, and then more psychology because I wanted to become a psychologist. And then upon becoming a psychologist, I felt I'd earned the right to talk from my experience as an autistic person, the parent of autistic kids and so on, and my ability to study the literature and the research. So.
And can I just say, as a parent of a child with autism, I think it's absolutely brilliant that you yourself have taken it on to educate yourself and made it your mission to educate everyone about autism, because it facilitates an easier life for people like my child and us as a family. So thank you very much for dedicating your life to what I consider to be a passion of mine now as well. So I thank you for doing that. Now, also, you've lectured in so many countries around the world and have been a guest lecturer in universities in both England and Australia. In your opinion, what are the differences with countries in the approach in all of research, treatment, and acceptance of people with autism?
It's really hard because I think in some ways there isn't a lot of difference, but in other ways the UK and Australia are working really hard to emphasize the strengths of people on the spectrum. We've worked hard to change the language so that we talk more about autistic people rather than a person with autism. It sounds a bit odd. I know it's come from person first language and trying to see the person and not what's called their disability, but I don't feel like I'm with autism. It's not like a man with a dog or a dog with a tail. It's a strange concept to me.
Yes.
whereas I am autistic, so I'm very happy to be called an autistic person. But even above and beyond all that, there's an emphasis in Australia in particular, part of the Autism Cooperative Research Centre where I am, where there's a huge focus on nothing about us without us.
Okay.
So instead of us and them, instead of us being subjects to study and people living with a disorder that needs a puzzle to be solved, we dislike that whole symbol of the puzzle piece.
Yes.
If other people realised how puzzling they were to each other, I think they would realise why it's not appropriate to use that. But anyway, I'm not a puzzle, I'm a person, and that's been a big shift. So inclusion is taking on that whole concept of using strengths, and that's changing in lots of different countries that I go to. So it's hard to say what's of difference because I see it in all countries.
Yes.
But it's perhaps slightly more advanced in some places. That thinking is more prevalent perhaps in the UK and in Australia, and it's beginning to become the way that people think here in Canada and other places.
So I know you've spent a bit of time recently here in Canada, and in your opinion, what can Canadians learn from other countries abroad that we can maybe think about and incorporate within our own society?
I think that it's good to think of autism along with, and in the same line as, we are people, we're human beings, and the human condition, if you like, is made up of all sorts of differences.
Absolutely.
And the other thing is, we actually think quite differently and process information quite differently to perhaps what we would think of as a typical brain.
Yes.
So if people don't understand that, they might lay upon us and expect of us similar ways of understanding the world to that of a typical individual, and we don't work that way. Just like we need to understand people of other ilks, how people that are deaf process information, how people that are visually impaired process information. It's the same in autism. We actually process information quite differently, so that needs to be understood more, and I'm pleased that we'll be talking about that in more detail.
Absolutely. And also, you've been involved with autism research for such a long time. In your opinion, how has it changed over time, and what do you see for the future?
That's been huge. The first conference I ever went to in 1994, in London actually, I travelled over from Australia and was in the UK for a while. I think there were 400 people there, and I felt like the only autistic person there.
Yes.
And it was very much pathologizing, and the emphasis on possibly how to fix us and how to change us to make us more social, etc. That emphasis in the research has changed dramatically. We're still exploring
Yes.
what autism is, absolutely, but it's not just an emphasis on awareness anymore. It's acceptance and working with us to help our lives be as the best they can be.
Which is excellent news, because I know when I used to be a teacher there in the early 90s, there wasn't any mention of autism in the public educational setting for secondary, for example.
Yeah.
And that's really good to know that England is coming a long way.
Sure.
In that forum. Now, I'm aware that there are many types of learners, as you've just described, and you've mentioned that people with autism learn in a different way. So what are the ways that people with autism intake information and knowledge, in your opinion?
You've probably heard that if you've met one person with autism, you've met one, and each one of us is so different from the other.
Absolutely. I think I've said it many times on this podcast before.
Yeah, so in some respects it's hard to say how do people with autism learn, as in autistic people learn, but having said that, I believe our minds are wired to learn via single focus. So we're not good at multitasking unless we're interested. Now,
Yes.
that's not a choice. I'll talk a bit more about that later. But if we're connected because we're interested, that leads to motivation. Then that's going to equip us to learn. There's kind of a myth out there, I think, that says autistic people learn visually. I think many do, but certainly many of us don't.
Well, that's really good to know, because
Yeah.
I've actually said the same thing. So please educate me and
You'll see young people wanting to move and be on the go,
yes.
and they are probably kinesthetic learners, so they learn as they move. I remember my youngest son, who's autistic, I could talk to him, share stories with him whilst he was on the trampoline, and he would take notice more than if I had him sitting down at a table, for example. Some kids who appear disruptive, if we give them things to do, hand out these papers, turn on the light switches, put out the chairs, give this note to somebody, it's a better option than trying to keep them still.
Yes.
If we can engage them through movement and learning. Some people learn whilst they're walking, for example, walking and talking, if they talk. Lots of people will learn. I'm an auditory learner.
Oh.
So, for example, if you gave me a phone number and you wrote it on a piece of paper,
Yes.
the likelihood of copying it into my phone, because I'm dyslexic, which also is an issue, but
So am I. So welcome to the club.
Thank you. Yeah, my grandkids are too. If I had to copy it from a piece of paper, it's quite likely I would get numbers back to front and in the wrong place.
Yes, I understand that.
Yeah. So if you speak the number to me and I tap it into my phone, I'm more likely to get it right. Okay. I'm an auditory learner. I recall videos and things I've heard almost word for word. I don't have an issue with that. But if you want me to write things down, that's an awful lot harder for me. So auditory learning, visual, kinesthetic, most of us are a mixture, obviously, of all of those things.
Yes, that's
true. A lot of
true.
us, will have a strength more in one than the other. So it's really important to get to know the person you're supporting rather than just assume, they're visual. You've got kids that are tearing things off the walls, pieces of paper,
Yes.
because they're actually invading them. So I think we should have artwork, for example, at school. Behind a divider you can go visit, rather than hanging off the walls and jumping at your face.
Yes, very true.
Yeah. So one of the good things is that technology often encompasses all of those things. So a lot of us really love computers, video games and so on, mainly because that incorporates visual, kinesthetic, auditory. All those things are involved in that kind of learning. So I know some people have said to me they're on the computer too much, and they want them to go outside and do other things, come and join a family meal, etc. And that's a good thing. But at the same time, if I can only learn when I'm interested, maybe I need to take what is of interest to me with me to the family table, or with me in some ways to be able to engage with, for example, being outside. So I have an electric bicycle that records my pedaling, how far I go, things like this. So it has computerized aspects to it, which I love and relate to. I love technology. I learn an awful lot from TV shows, and someone joining me to ask about, but they need permission, of course. Don't just come along and sit next to me or something, you might get whacked. Come join me through invitation, and then we can talk about what I'm watching. Rather than passing judgment, we can use my interest and a child's interest to take them places we want them to go, rather than taking interest away. In the old days, a couple of years ago that is, people used interest as a reward, which is all well and good.
Yes.
And then they try and make me do stuff, or a child do other things and once you finish that, then you can have these, which is not a bad thing, but it would be even better if we used that interest all the way through, not just as a reward.
Yes.
How many of us, when we get older, as ordinary folk, want to have a job? We can't always manage it. It's not always possible, but we'd love to have a job that gives us meaning, that we're passionate about.
Absolutely.
We don't just have that as a reward. That's our livelihood, you know. And it's the same in autism. I'm much more likely to learn whilst engaged with what motivates me.
And you want to know what? I'm really happy that you've actually mentioned that technology is a good thing, because I know there's stuff in the media and there's this myth that technology, too much of it, isn't good. But my son is exactly what you're describing. He learns everything on the computer, and he's highly motivated. And you are 100% correct in the sense that when I join him in his activity or passion, I find he's much more communicative with me, and I get far more out of him. And so for the people out there judging parents who are allowing their children to use technology, the television, and all these other mediums to reach their children, I'm so pleased that you've mentioned that fact, so that will hopefully curtail those opinions for another day.
Yeah, I just want to add, there is a difference. I know that people can become obsessive
Yes.
in their hours of video gaming and so on. So if we change the word obsession and talk about passion,
Yes.
and if we change how somebody is involved with technology so that we make it more diverse and we include it in activities outside home, inside home with others, it doesn't have to be locked in their room alone where it's the only way they can connect.
Oh,
So what
absolutely.
you do, what you do with that, everything and anything potentially can become obsessive in
Yes.
as much as it will take over too many hours of your time. But if you use the motivation of connection, you can actually share that across various technical mediums. It doesn't have to be just the one.
Yes.
And it does take practice and it takes time, but it's worth the effort.
Oh, and you want to know what? I'm really happy that you clarified that point, because that's actually what I meant when I was saying what I said. So I'm thank you for the clarification. Now, I know you've written wonderful papers that I've had the pleasure of reading, and you talk about shifting attention. So shift attention. Why is it difficult for people with autism to shift attention?
It's difficult for us because our default setting, the way our brains are actually sharing information within the brain,
Yes.
is built in such a fashion that we're not good at taking in lots of information at once. So sometimes it's referred to as being detailed focused, but we only focus on details we're interested in.
Yes.
But it does mean missing the big picture. So if you don't access the wider picture, it's quite hard to have all the aspects of information that others will be accessing. And that makes it quite difficult to multitask. So shifting attention from one thing to another requires a brain that notices here,
Okay.
now, today, tomorrow. These are all concepts which are quite hard in autism because the only thing I know is now. And actually connecting to something that might be coming next, I might check in all the time, ask questions all the time. Is that going to happen? You know, what do we do here? And even if someone tells me, I might still echo that because what I actually know is only now. I can't feel or connect to something beyond. When I'm interested and focused on something, on like a video game or the television movie or something I'm into, I can learn all those quite easily, and I'm excited when I get to see what comes next because I'm connecting in a way that I don't usually.
Okay.
And it makes much more sense to me. It's the same reason why a kid will line their things up, or it's a sense of, I know now. If I put that in a line, I know what comes next. And it's a relief. It takes away anxiety. Whereas other people are wanting us to do a whole host of things, often of a social nature.
Yes.
And they're thinking, I don't really know what they're thinking, but it appears that they're thinking that's more healthy. Healthy for who? If
Very
I'm not
good
wired
question.
up that way. I mean, we would not say to somebody in a wheelchair, look, the rest of us walk, so get over it. We would not say that. We accept they need that chair to enable them to get around.
Yes.
And it's the same in autism. I shift attention from one thing to another as I'm enabled through what I'm interested in. Outside of interest, I'm actually disconnected and don't notice. So telling me to notice, it's a little bit like telling someone to hear something when they're, take out their hearing aids, now hear. No, they hear with their aids in. That's what motivates them. I'm connected through interest. Outside of that, I'm disconnected.
So when you say you're in the present and it's difficult for you to anticipate what's coming in the future, is that the same thing then as, for example, my son works really well with visual displays because I have to give him the cards with what comes next, because if I give him one task at a time, he has an inability to foresee or what comes next, and he needs constant reminders. Is that similar?
Absolutely, that's absolutely. First, next cards are very useful. You can have it on an iPhone or an iPad. You can have a sort of a digital schedule of you do this and then you do that. And you can have it in such a way that the schedule on the iPad will move you forward through it. I remember giving my son 4 or 5 chores of things he needed to do, and I wrote them on a piece of paper, put it on the board. He read them, put a line through them all, and said, "I've done them." And I said to him, reading them is not the same. You told me to read those, he said. So his understanding is an incomplete concept, an incomplete picture. Having read it, I've therefore done it, I tick it off. So what's the understanding of doing it? See, in his mind, it was reading it.
Yes.
So I needed to explain, first you read it, and then. And it's the same kind of thing. If you don't understand how our minds process information and how we think, you could label us as difficult, naughty, I hate this term, challenging behaviours and so on. No, it's that I haven't grasped what it is you're asking. You teach me the concepts bit by bit, slow as we go, and I'll get there.
And I'm really happy that you mentioned, because a situation just happened recently with my son's teacher. He came up to me and he said, I'm having a difficulty. And I said, oh, why? He said, well, I asked your child to do this in class. And he responded, no, he didn't ask to do this. He said, he asked him if he wanted to do the work. Your son said no. And I said, oh. And I said, but you didn't tell him to do it. You asked him if he wanted to do it. And typical, he's being honest. No, he didn't want to do the work, which is the question that you'd asked. So I'm really happy that you made that point regarding your son, because I think too often in society, we don't even realize the real question that we're asking, because it's a very literal interpretation of a sentence instead of the figurative metaphoric, I should say, meaning behind that of what that sentence means.
Absolutely. People think they're being polite when they say, would you like to? What they really mean is say, please sit down. But they say, would you like to? And you think, no.
And that's exactly it. Now, to move on to another point, you mentioned gamma connectivity as well in your paper. Can you please explain what that is?
Yeah, it's a very exciting concept, actually.
Yes.
I was involved in some research at the University of Louisville. It was only on a small amount of kids, and it's not been replicated, but for me it was exciting. What we found was that, we have different names for brainwaves. We have alpha brainwaves. We have beta, theta. They're names for different frequencies in the brain that particular information is carried on. Gamma is one of those brain wavelengths.
Yes.
And it actually is really, really essential to making sense of the mix from the other information to build a bigger picture. So without gamma, our brain is almost, without gamma connectivity, without gamma working, our brains are not connecting to the information that is roaming around in it. So what we found in some of the autistic kids that we looked at was that their gamma seemed to be scattered.
Oh.
It wasn't really doing its job. It was scattered. It was almost in excess, too much. When they were looking at a video that they were interested in, however, gamma seemed to be triggered into doing its job. So this is really important, because what that's saying is, without motivation,
Yes.
then gamma is staying scattered. It's not doing what it should. Which means we have evidence base, if you like, for why we need to work with interest. Not necessarily, people have this thing about special interests and almost in line with hobbies kind of thing.
Okay.
I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about, if you define interest as anything that captures attention,
Yes.
then that's what I'm talking about. So when attention is captured by someone's noticing it, interest in it, you then use it. And we noticed that if I put on a video, which I love, these sorts of videos, what's the guy's name? He's a very well-known person who works with nature, and he has lots and lots of shows. David Attenborough.
Oh, okay. I was
Yeah.
going to say David Suzuki because we're in Canada, but
Oh,
yes,
all right.
absolutely David Attenborough.
David Attenborough. And I love watching, about birds and animals and things. We put some of those videos on, and most of the kids weren't particularly interested.
Okay.
There was one or two girls who were, but most weren't. But when we put on perhaps a different type of video, some of them were like Disney videos, some were action videos, kids that were interested in those, that's when their gamma was triggered, and that was when connectivity occurred, and that's when they were alert. So I guess I'm suggesting that in autism, if you have our attention through interest and motivation,
Yes.
not necessarily special interest, but through interest and motivation, you're going to switch gamma on. We're then available to learn, and our brain is alert. Outside of that, we're almost asleep. So you can talk to us and we're in another world. It's like, I'm not hearing you, but if you touch on something that I notice, you'll have my attention. Not necessarily eye contact. Eye contact's not attention.
No.
I hear better when I'm not looking.
Yes.
If I'm looking, I'm focused on seeing. If I'm hearing and not looking, I'm focused on what you're telling me. When people tell me to look at them, which used to happen a lot as a kid, they'd take my face and put their hand under the chin and point me towards them, then I'd be locked at looking and I couldn't hear anything.
I've heard that several times before. And would that be the same reason why sometimes I have better communication when my son is in the car sitting beside me than standing right in front of me?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Because I believe although he hasn't communicated with, because he's much, much younger.
You have the evidence.
That absolutely we have the evidence. And that's really interesting to note, so that for people listening, that means that this is a neurological effect.
Yeah.
It's not, it has
right.
nothing to do with outside influences or something that they can control themselves.
That's totally right. I'm not being rude or difficult. I am being autistic. And to respect my autism and my learning difficulties that go with how my brain is wired up, it might be better that you don't ask me to look at you.
Absolutely. and when you were talking also about a child being, that a child is kind of asleep or whatnot with what you've mentioned, is that the same thing as when my child, for example, they call it processing time, where he needs time to process on his own? Is that the same type of thing?
It might well be. They're not really the same, but we certainly need time to process. If you're thinking attention is only single-focused, one thing at a time, when a person talks, they move their hands, their body is saying all sorts of things, their words are saying all sorts of things, There's a lot of information to try to take in. So we'll often need longer. The other illustration example I'll talk about sometimes is a 4-laned or 5-laned highway where everything is moving. Suddenly moving into a kind of bottleneck and going off into one lane.
Yes.
Everything is slowed down, brought to a halt at times, and it takes a lot longer.
Okay.
So you're presenting me with all this information like the 5 lanes of traffic. I'm processing it through one. So everything is going to be slower, take me longer. We have what we think of as a 10-second rule,
Okay.
which is a very useful tool in
Which
autism.
is what exactly?
It means when someone says anything, I count to 10. That's about 10 seconds. Now that might
Yes.
seem like a very long time, but that actually is giving me time to process information. Now, not all of us need it. I haven't needed 10 seconds to hear and respond to you.
Okay.
I don't have huge problems with eye contact a lot of the time. It's still an issue for me, but I tend to look at people's mouths and around the tops of their
You're looking
eyebrows
very
and
well at me.
so, but I'm going on 66 years of age.
Okay.
This wasn't the case as a much younger person, and I'm working with my passion just now. I'm
Yes.
talking about things I'm absolutely passionate and love. Whereas if you had me in a social situation, I don't know, in the pub on a Friday night, I would be a very different person. I would hardly speak at all. There would be
Okay.
far too much going on, and I probably wouldn't last there very long. So we're all different, and we're different people in different situations.
So, to clarify, when my son, because I know sometimes he gets this as well from people that are unaware about autism, is that when someone asks him a question, if he doesn't respond with, let's say, within that beautiful 10 seconds that you exhibited, people often assume that he's not listening or that he's unaware of the question. But what you're saying is he's taking time to process the question.
He's taking time. He may not understand. It depends on what they're talking about, of course, if he's connected to the information.
Absolutely.
But sometimes I know I've come out with an understanding or a response to something a week later when I've suddenly realised what that person was meaning.
Yes.
So please, avoid repeating the question. Certainly don't paraphrase.
Okay.
If I said to my son when he was younger, dinner's ready, and he hasn't come to the table, in the past I've said to him things like, it's on the table. And I remember he came up once and hit me.
Oh.
I said, what's the matter? He said, dinner should be on a plate, not on the table. But I'm actually saying different things.
Yes.
So if I want to say dinner's ready and there's no reply within a few, appropriate time, then I should say dinner's ready. Just say it again.
Okay.
And if necessary, you can write it on a piece of paper. You can, because words aren't always the way to go. You might present a photo of the dinner. But please
Absolutely.
avoid paraphrasing.
And I really love the fact that since my son was diagnosed and you're speaking right now, it's a constant reminder that I'm reevaluating the English language when I'm speaking about what I really mean by the sentence that I'm saying and what the words are actually saying are often two totally different things to the person receiving the information. And I think that for those of you out there listening, when communicating with somebody who's more a literal communicator with what the words actually mean, to be aware that you might actually be communicating something completely different than the intended message that you wanted to come across.
Yeah, people do that all the time.
Yes, and I'm beginning to realize it even more and more as my son gets older, how aware that point is. And I know you've touched on it, but can you explain single-mindedness to our audience?
Yeah, I guess it's just a matter of fact for those of us on the spectrum. We're very single-minded, both in our learning styles and in, therefore, what we hold on to. So if I believe something single-mindedly, it's really hard to shift me away from that because I haven't accessed the bigger part of the picture. So if somebody says, okay, I'll pick you up at 9, meaning they're going to come to my home with their car and collect me for 9 o'clock.
Yes.
If they turn up at 5 past, I've missed my appointment. I'm not going there. You said 9 o'clock.
Okay.
That's being single-minded. It's not being bloody-minded. It sounds like it. I hope I'm allowed to say that on radio or whatever. But it's not being difficult. It's being autistic and being literal. So it's better to say I'll be there around 9, even though I might not like that. I'll be there between 9 and 9:20 is a better way. People say lunch is at 12. It's better to say lunch is at lunchtime.
Okay.
Because my learning style with my brain that's doing one thing at a time also means that I'm going to form single-minded understandings. I'm not going to be intuitive, although I think actually I'm very intuitive.
Yes.
But I'm not going to be intuitive about those bigger social stuff type things that people involve in a conversation that are just taken for granted as humans interact with one another. The small talk stuff, for example.
Yes.
I cannot see the point of that.
And I know many people that feel the exact same.
So there's two things. Single-mindedness is a part of my autistic learning style. It's the way my brain is wired up to learn. It will lead to single-minded outcomes and thinking.
Can you give an example of single-minded outcomes?
Apart from, the one I've just given, or a couple, I suppose I might be less connected to thinking and feeling.
Okay.
I might be more connected to thinking or feeling, not both.
Okay.
I might be developing what we call core beliefs.
Yes.
Based on that and that happened, it therefore means this.
Okay.
Whereas
yes.
actually, that and that happening could mean this or that or the other. The fact that there could be more than a single thing happening is actually really hard for me to build an understanding of. So I'll have incomplete concepts like yours, mine, ours, theirs, and so on, as a response or an outcome from how I process information. If you had a piece of paper on the table here,
yes.
I was a person who loved paper. I'd collect paper anywhere, stuff it down my shirt, absolutely. Have paper everywhere. So I'm picking this piece of paper up, which isn't mine, it's yours, it's on your desk. It's a memo to you that you want to keep, okay?
Yes.
I picked that piece of paper up. Do I have the piece of paper in my hand?
I believe so.
Just say yes.
Okay, yes.
Yep. So I've got that piece of paper. Is it mine?
No.
But I have it.
I get it.
Yeah, so I have this piece of paper, therefore it's mine. That's a single-minded kind of concept, which isn't understanding the wider picture of just because you took it and now have it doesn't make it yours. All those nuances of what makes it mine. If it were given to me,
yes,
it'd be mine. If it was mine to start with, it'd be mine. But it's not mine because I took it. But I have it, and in my single-minded thinking, therefore, it's mine. There are so many things in everyday human interaction where autistic people and non-autistic people come a cropper because they're not speaking the same language.
And I'm beginning to realize, even as we're speaking now, the numerous situations that have occurred in social interactions with my son and even with his friends group, how many times there's a miscommunication just based on what you're saying. You've mentioned two examples that my son still has difficulty. For example, 9-ish.
Yeah.
He hates ish.
Yes.
What's ish?
Yeah, that doesn't. He's looking for something that's concrete.
Yes.
So I would be saying to him, you tell me how I can explain to you that it won't necessarily be on the dot of 9. I'm aiming for that. Tell me how you'd like me to say it.
And that's another piece of great advice, because you're putting the power, which isn't what I did, by the way. I think I failed in my interaction with him. I think the advice that you're giving me is far better than me saying, well, it's just an ish.
Yeah.
It's around, and trying to get into further obvious, confusing communication with
he's looking for something that's firmer,
Absolutely.
that he can have a concept, an understanding of.
Absolutely. No, that's really fantastic information. So also another thing that I wanted you to clarify is how attention is processed by a person with autism.
Again, attention is processed when we notice, and we can connect to it. So there has to be gamma connectivity, there has to be interest.
Yes.
There has to be a reason for me to notice.
Now, can I ask a question? If, let's say, a parent like myself or a teacher or anybody who's trying to make connection with someone with autism to get that gamma connectivity, how would you suggest they go about trying to find it?
Yeah, you've got to get to know us, I suppose, so that you know what's of interest to us.
Yes.
Lots of young people I know, so these are little people, or some are a bit older actually, are into Disney.
Okay.
So characters like, I don't know if you have these here, I guess you do, Thomas the Tank Engine.
Absolutely,
and,
yes.
Fireman Sam, that might be an English one, I'm unsure.
Fireman Sam is English,
Yeah.
but Thomas the Tank Engine we certainly have here.
Bob the Builder. And
Bob the Builder we have here.
Yeah. Stories like Frozen.
Oh, yes.
Disneyland with the girls. My Little Pony.
Yes.
These are all characters that are commonly of interest to many autistic children. So if you know that someone's into trains, even if it starts with Thomas,
yes,
you then relate. You have train cup, train toothbrush, you have Thomas in the bath, you have ways of using that interest across everyday life in a multitude of ways. Now, again, the typical world out there may say, you can't take Thomas when you're 18. Yes, you can.
Absolutely,
you can't take trains into, why not? And if you're building connection, then actually some of that will diversify quite a bit.
Yes.
We have in Australia one of our ex-deputy prime ministers who's on the autism spectrum, who has written his third book, I think, on railway gauges and things to do with railways.
Nice.
His passion for railway gauges has not stopped him becoming a politician, exactly. So just because it's different, it doesn't mean it's out of bounds. I have a young lad who loves smoke alarms, and so he takes a little collection of 4 or 5 smoke alarms, little round ones you see in a ceiling. Do you know what I'm talking about?
We have them in our own place. Yep. Yes.
He'll take 4 or 5 of those to school, and there'll be a conversation piece. We'll start off conversation relating to other people. He does the same thing day after day, possibly with different smoke alarms, different colours. They'll find different things to connect to them, so they are actually broadening his ability to connect in all sorts of ways, but it starts with him. So you've got to join us before you can expect us to join you.
And I think that's a really good, important piece, because I've seen too, and I know in the beginning, before I knew anything about autism, trying to connect with my son, one of the things that I definitely had to learn is it did have to be on his agenda, not my own, and I could bring my wants and desires and place them on him to try to coax him out. That I really had to listen, not only with my ears and my eyes, but my soul, to be able to connect with him, which was a real learning curve, I think, because a lot of parents just want to find that connectivity to find a way. And I think what you've just described are brilliant ways of allowing parents not to judge about what they should be doing and what they should be facilitating and how to go about it, and really choose a passion from their child. And their child is unique and individual and really learn about them in various ways that you've mentioned.
I've had, just on that note, I have had people say to me, but my child doesn't appear to have anything of interest, not interested in anything. And quite often I've said things like, give them a disposable camera, one of those throwaway things. You can buy at the supermarket, at least you can in Australia. Then they were about $5 or $6 in Oz. And let them take photographs. And then look at what they take pictures of. That might be a way of uncovering something that you actually find does matter to them. It might be that they're still very young and they're kind of all over the place and they're everywhere and into everything and haven't settled yet on anything in particular. Join them. Be on the ground, be romping with them and playing, interacting physically. Kids need that stuff, and so do parents. If parents don't have some kind of comeback from their child, as in feel something back from them, they'll stop relating, and they feel hurt and isolated, and find a way. Get down there, be physical, splash water, take whatever it takes, whatever it takes to join that little person. And eventually, over time, it's quite likely they will confidently move towards an area where they're more at home. It happens in all kids anyway, but most kids go through lots of activities pretty much at the similar time. So they might be in the Scouts, they might join swimming, they might be in ballet, they might be dancing, they might be in the gym, they could be in lots of other things. Most of our kids tend not to need to be in multiple things, but for some kids, they will try each before they settle on one. So don't give up on that. Just find a way to join your child.
And that's really great advice. Now, I know a myth that I've heard, which I particularly don't like because I truly believe that my son has it, but there's a myth that people with autism lack empathy. Can you please explain to our audience why this came about and what your thoughts are on the matter? This concludes the first half of this podcast, and I hope that you're learning loads and enjoying yourself as much as I was, sitting down and talking with the brilliant Dr. Wenn. Don't forget to listen to the finale and the second part on December 15th to continue to be inspired and in awe not only of his path as a community member, but his knowledgeable insight that he's graciously sharing with our Autism 30 team and you, our listeners. I hope that you're all going to have an excellent holiday season and celebrate it with joy, peace, and merriment. This is Tally telling you to live in love.
Hey yo, I'm an autism awareness angel, making sure my wings protect the different, the stranger than. I'm an autism awareness angel. It's good, cause I'm cool with the unique behavior. I'm an autism awareness angel. Will you accept me? Cause I accept you. I'm an autism awareness angel, cause a view from the spectrum is a better point of view.